Is everyone doing fine? Tell me. This is my podcast. It's called Identity. I sometimes I get in my own way, I would say. Sometimes I get in my own way. That's what I have to say. I'd say I get my own way if I was like trying to set it up. The more that I try to format it, it's kind of the worse that it is. It's just that you're just naturally inclined to try to format it when you have something at all that you're showing to people. Like, you want it to look nice. You want things to look nice. And you don't want to upset people, but you just go wrong. You go wrong because you try to make it presentable. You try to make your thing presentable, but it really, as a solo podcaster, I would say I guess to me it feels like your only value is if you're saying what you want to, and then like if I get off of saying what I want to, then I lose sight of what the value of the podcast actually is, or like that it would have the actual value in it. So like if I get off track, like I would start saying things that I didn't want to say if I was like trying to say things to people or trying to fix people in some way, or like speak to people to save them from things or help their life. Like I'm trying to control them in some direction, when that's what you don't want to do, because then you're being sanctimonious. You don't want to be sanctimonious. I get off track, I get in my own way if I start to be sanctimonious, so I'm sorry for any way that if I sound sanctimonious. I'm sorry for the recent bout of sanctimony that I've been overcoming, that I've been trying to fight back like it's a disease in my life. It's kind of like you get sanctimonious when you get political sometimes, or maybe that's what I'm referring to. I don't think that my political takes have gotten too sanctimonious, or like what I've done is that sanctimonious so far. It's just that I get in my own way if I speak in a moralistic way, like I have some moral high ground. That's when people don't really want to hear it. And that's what I mean by getting in my own way. It's just I hinder my own potential for popularity. But like when you want to be the most popular. And I wonder often if podcasting is if it's going to make it so that solo podcasting is the predominant podcasting at some point, like maybe 10 years down the line or something, or if it'll never be like that, or if group podcasting will always just be better, because group podcasting, people talking to each other, is going to get more views. That's what's reflected now. You have more people, you have the chance of having a more successful podcast. I bet the top 100 podcasts, probably like 95% of them are more than one person. Yeah, maybe like I don't know. Most of them are more than one person, people talking, because it's not sustainable to do just one person. It's not sustainable. Like, I don't know how long I can just talk about some new topic. Maybe I can do it for a long time. I don't really know. But like this format for my podcast, like it's kind of just more a project. I'm not going to make it so that it's my life thing. That's like my podcast forever. Like, I can't do this forever. I would end it at some point and then do like something else under a different title, or just like something more tangential to podcasting. But I'd say generally it shouldn't be sustainable, but it could be, as long as you don't try to format it, because it is just me talking. It's not like I would change so much that I would lose the ability to talk about things. But sometimes I lie to myself and say that I can, or that you can change so much that like you lose your ability to do something. Sometimes you get into telling yourself that. I guess it's something that's similar to, it's something along the lines of never mind. That wasn't important. But I wonder if solo podcasting will eventually be like people will be interested in solo podcasting over group podcasting, because we kind of did that with music. Well, as far as singing is concerned, like at some point we started to focus on people's individual voices. Like in the year 2000, we got really interested just in soloists, which would be an individual person's reflection of their interpretation of sound, the way that sound is supposed to be, but like whatever, something specific to an individual, like as an individual's interpretation on things at some point became really highly valued for us in the entertainment medium. Like that's what we wanted out of entertainment, was just what's the sound of an individual voice comparative to other individuals' voices. And just like if you have a really good voice, that's all you need to make it, is like something that people realize at some point, like at the point that they made the show The Voice, or at least that's what The Voice is telling you was important about life. It's like, well, all you need is a voice to make it. It's all about having a voice. And we're like, and America largely agreed, based on like the viewership of the show was pretty high, whatever. But that's just like that era in America, is like solo singers. American Idol and reality shows developed around finding individual singers so that you can like there's something to be said about connecting to an individual person's story. I'm just saying that we did that in music and it's like at some point soloists kind of rose above bands, really, at least as far as popular music was concerned. As far as like what was popular, like soloists became more popular in the later 2000s, but like I know that music dates back further than the 20th century. Like music dates back forever, so it's not like you'd say that there was a point at which like soloists were always big, though. Even in the 60s and 70s is the thing. Like they were always big. It's just at some point we're like, oh, we just want to hear one person's voice. And I'd say that we're kind of off that track now, seeing as that we don't have all these reality shows based around finding a singer. It's kind of like talking replaced singing in that respect, but it's not. So as far as that analogy is concerned, then I'm saying that like group podcasts are the same as a band, but a solo podcast is just like a soloist. But like a soloist, it's like a soloist, but you could be a lot of the people that were popular soloists like post 2000 were just puppets of the music industry. But there's a lot of soloists that are honest about it, and that's like that's what you like about them, like Neil Young. Like a Neil Young or a Bob Dylan or a John Mayer, if you like that kind of thing, if you like the John Mayer kind of thing, or a Mac DeMarco. Like if you like the John Mayer sort of thing, like enough with John Mayer at this point. Enough with John Mayer. I liked him for some time, but like only so much. I think, in my opinion, enough with John Mayer. But like that's what's valuable about my podcast, is I'm just gonna be like, I don't like John Mayer. That's something that somebody wants to hear. You don't want to hear me say like, oh, I respected John Mayer, or like I used to respect him just like we all did, or like I'm totally on board, like I'm trying to save face with John Mayer people. People don't want to hear me save face with anybody. It's more interesting if I just make an assessment that is particular to me. That's what's true. That's what's real. It's just so real. This podcast is so raw and so real. So I apologize for any amount of sanctimony that you would have had to sit through. It's like, I would say that I was sanctimonious any time that I was devoted too much to this being an art project. Like, if I was trying to make this artistic. But I get in, like, that is something I end up doing when I'm, like, play somebody that's an identity, rather than that I'm talking about the idea as me just having opinions on the idea. Sometimes I become the idea or whatever, but that's just part of, like, this is an art project rather than just a podcast. But like I would get sanctimonious if I was trying to defend that I was an artist, probably is what would make you sanctimonious. But like that you would try to defend your position as something kind of makes it so that you automatically have some. Well, it can lead to you thinking you have some sort of moral high ground, I guess, if you're like, I'm an artist. Like, if you take yourself seriously like that, you you could get into where you think you have a moral high ground. But what else was I going to say? As far as individual assessments go, I was watching Platoon yesterday. And I was watching Platoon because I looked it up, and it was the number one on a couple websites. They said Platoon was the best Vietnam War movie. So I was like, oh, I haven't seen that. I like Vietnam War movies. I'm going to watch that movie. And that is what actually played out in my life. Like, sometimes you're like, I'm going to set out to do this thing, and then that's just what you do. And then life, that's a complicating factor to me about life, is that when you just do, like, oh, I'm going to go to Chipotle for dinner, and then you don't switch your decision. Like, you decide that the day before or something, like, oh, tomorrow night I'll go to Chipotle, and then you actually do. Like, then life becomes confusing. Like, you just can do what you wanted to, rather than that things are confusing and static all the time. That doesn't make sense, that things can be easy. But it's just as hard as you want to make it. It's just as hard as you want to make it. Like, you can set out, but sometimes you have longer term goals. Like, rather than saying, tomorrow night I'm going to go to Chipotle for dinner. Like, you have the ability to predict the future, is what that says. That's why I'm saying it's confusing. Like, why do you have the ability to predict the future like that? That you just do what you, like, it plays out exactly like you said? Like, I feel like maybe it's just inundation with 90s and 2000s TV kids shows or sitcoms or whatever that makes me think that things don't go according to plan, or just TV would present an unrealistic view of life where the characters are written to be characters that are sort of transparent to some degree. You understand they're like, the calamity and the uproariousness of their life is more on display for you, but it's kind of just, when things go wrong for characters in TV shows, it's meant to be that way, or it's the pathway for things going wrong is laid out for things to go wrong. You have to see flaws in the characters in a certain way, as written by the writers and producers of the show. You have to see a flaw a certain way. So, like, when things go wrong in a TV show, it's just kind of unrealistic to think that things aren't always as you plan, or like things aren't always as you picture, and sometimes they are exactly as you picture them, interestingly enough. I think maybe that's just a trope in our society. Like, things aren't going to go according to plan, or just a superstition, like, or maybe not in society, just something that I've picked up. It's like, you're supposed to think things don't go according to plan, but maybe they actually go according to plan most of the time. But why are you able to predict the future like that? Like, tell me why. I just wish I knew about why the future prediction. It's like, you can set out something a year in advance, and then you can achieve that. Like, if you're able to achieve your goals, then you get to tell yourself, you're like, oh, I have the ability to predict the future. Like, you can build a lot of confidence in yourself if you accomplish what you wanted to. It kind of makes it, like, if you're able to do that all the time, it would make you seem like you were invincible, like, if you achieved all your goals. Like, but it depends on your depends on your expectations. Well, you could have really low expectations on yourself and make yourself feel invincible that way. You could accomplish a bunch of easy goals all the time. It depends on what your natural level of pressure for yourself is, like how much you're going to drive yourself to complete a really ambitious goal. Like, you would have a lot of ambition if you saw yourself to have ambition, if you saw yourself as somebody who was deserving of lots of ambition or deserving of achieving really high goals. And no, it's just the amount of sacrifice you put in is the amount of payoff you're going to feel. It's like, is the amount of reward it's going to be. So the more challenging a goal, when you accomplish that, the more rewarding it's going to feel. It's just that I feel like there are some people that can accomplish easy goals and still feel rewarded for it, just based on that they naturally don't expect a lot out of themselves. But depends on how you see yourself, or it depends on what you like. Maybe you just need a chip on your shoulder or something to accomplish bigger goals, like to actually do something, to be somebody who's a stand-up comedian, when most people, like, you go into stand-up comedy when all of your peers generally are just trying to get regular jobs, or like not do something that's so risky, like try to succeed in something that's so risky. But if you go into stand-up comedy when like others of your peers could probably go into it, they're just not risking it. Like, other people around you are just as funny. And like comedians say that all the time, is like, I've met plenty of people that are funnier than I am, that they're like, they could go into comedy, they just didn't do that. Like, you'd go into a risky field to succeed, and just speaks to that you see yourself as deserving of more than other people or something. Like, some people just naturally have that, put too much expectation on themselves to achieve something really far in advance. But yeah, you can be like, I'm going to do this, and this for like tomorrow, and then you can accomplish it. But trying to do that for a year in a row, like, I'm going to do this, and then this, and then this, in order to further my career, for me to achieve the goals, like, that takes more discipline when it's over a longer period of time. Whatever. I'm just talking about general things for no reason at all, like a desk job, your goals. Like, it's just interesting to think about. You have to go to a destination. You have to go out of your way from where you are right now. You have to challenge yourself to go to different destinations along your path to achieve a goal that's farther away. And it'll be more rewarding if you get to the destination that's far away that you want to get to. Like, if you arrive at that destination, you see that in yourself you have the ability to just do what you thought you were going to, and then like that'll make it so that when you look into the future for other things you want to accomplish, you're like, oh yeah, my sacrifices that I make actually do pay off, and I do have the ability to do, like, predict the future. Like, I can accomplish what. So like, if you feel like you have the ability to accomplish your goals, you will just set off towards destinations that are seemingly unachievable more readily than somebody else. Like, I don't know the importance of me saying that. It's probably just sounds kind of general. I'm just saying, like, I don't know what the significance of it is. I'm just stalling for time. Like, sanctimoniousness, I get. So I saw Platoon yesterday, and I think Apocalypse Now is better than Platoon, is what I would say. Apocalypse Now is better. Platoon is a good movie. The characterization of it is good. I like the characters. Like, Charlie Sheen's character is really good because he's not really a hero. He just kind of has a certain... You just wonder about what he is like when he's crazy. At least that's what you think from the beginning, because he's kind of different from the other people in the platoon. But he's not exactly... I like the character, the main character who Charlie Sheen plays, because he's not in touch with his emotions the way that you're supposed to be for being in a platoon. Like, he doesn't exactly understand the camaraderie aspect of it, but that's just because he's not from the same background as them, and also he's trying to acclimate himself to the platoon, and he's only like been there for a couple days, but he's not from the same background as the other people that volunteered, and they make note of that in the beginning, that he's like a rich person, like he's like a liberal that had compassion and wanted to volunteer to, because he didn't want the poor people to have to take the brunt of it, is what he said in the beginning. So he's like, I'm a rich person, and then the poor people are like, oh, we don't even want you, like, you're stupid for volunteering, because and they just think he's some sort of crusader. They don't really like him, and he's just an outcast, but that's just because he's not in touch with his emotions the way that you're supposed to be, him being like a rich liberal type, and for being in a war. At least that's what I took away from it. But as it turns out, he's like a hero. He just isn't in touch with his crazy side yet, and because his crazy side is going to be a different different flavor of it, and that's what eventually came through. Is like, yeah. So I like the character. I'd say that the best scene in the movie was when they burned down the village. That was the best for obvious reasons. But I mean, just when they went into the village, because that's the point of a Vietnam War movie, is just to highlight the how bad it looked, how bad the appearance of it is, like what America was doing in the Vietnam War. But like them taking the village is the height of you getting upset about what it, like how bad it looks, like what America is doing. But it's just kind of I think it just kind of shows it, like them taking the village shows what the whole thing is about, that like America was already, it's just because America is emotional and defensive about things. Like that's what they are as a person. They're kind of like the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and I think the Korean and Vietnam Wars are sort of part of the backlash of that. Like they're still kind of defensive or worried about what's going on over in East Asia. And like it's an enemy that they don't really understand. They don't really understand the Japanese or Koreans or Vietnamese, like East Asian. They don't really understand that kind of enemy. So America can't go about its business regularly in the world when they're worried about what's happening in East Asia, even after World War II ended. So they're like I know it's about communism. They wanted to stop they wanted to stop the rise of communism. It's just that you end up in Korea, and especially that you end up in Vietnam, is like it's just that they kind of missed the point. Like they're lashing out at whatever. Like I'm just saying, like it kind of shows that the scene where they take the village just kind of shows that America is like, they've taken it too far because they're just kind of afraid of what's going on in East Asia, and now they're lashing out at people that aren't even in the fight at this point, because they just want to make sure that they don't have to live in fear, because they're killing people in the village and they don't really have the proper motivation for it. Like they're conflicted about killing the people in the village, but the more people that they kill, the more that the villagers are upset at them and like yelling at them, but then they just kill the villagers yelling at them because they don't like that the villagers are making them feel guilty. And it's just like they don't want the guilt to come back to them, so they're trying to stifle all the guilt that the villagers are throwing at them, so they're killing more of them. Because they have consciences is the point. Like America has a conscience. So they have to deal with like how conflicted they feel about taking a village. But it just has to do with the emotional complex, the same one that would cause them to lash out defensively at East Asian countries. And in some ways unnecessarily, but like just kind of like the adventurous spirit of it, of America, being as that America is founded by adventurers. That kind of comes through in this scene where they're taking the Vietnamese village, because like they're adventurers, and sometimes that takes them too far. But I think it just speaks to an emotional spirit about things that would cause them to do damage to people who don't deserve it. Like it's misplaced anger. Like a lot of anger that the people who receive the most anger sometimes it's just misplaced. Like they weren't deserving of it. Like Vietnam was just the recipient of a lot of misplaced anger, that pent up frustration from an emotional America. And yeah, it's just that. But like the kind of anger that comes from you not wanting other people to tell you that you're guilty, and then you get angry at them for like that like it seems like they want you to be guilty in their direction or something. You don't want to deal with the guilt, like that kind of anger. Whatever. I don't know, but that's an opinion. That's an opinion. I think Apocalypse Now is better than Platoon. I think Apocalypse Now is better because it captures the disorganization of it a lot better, because it's a more it's larger in scope. I think that's what I like about Apocalypse Now. It's larger in scope. It covers more of the whole schematics of it, like the air and the ground. But Platoon is obviously just about the ground. So that's why I like Apocalypse Now better. But Full Metal Jacket, is that's maybe my favorite one, but that's just because I like Stanley Kubrick movies because I'm a basic bitch. But it depends on, it's up in the air. Does that make you basic? I really like Stanley Kubrick movies. Stanley Kubrick's my favorite director. I like his movies because they aren't really so much about a story. A lot of the time, they're kind of more about the cycle. I would say they're kind of more about a cycle than they are a story that needs to end somewhere. That's why I like Stanley Kubrick, and that's why I like Stanley Kubrick. Did you know that that's why? My Siri turned on and it was recording everything I said. It's like, and it lists what I said. It says, you were invincible like $30 goes like, but depends on your tolerance for turns on your expectations, or you could, I really low expectations on yourself and make yourself feel invincible. That way you could come easy calls all the time. It depends on what your natural level of pressure for yourself, as like how much are gonna drive yourself to complete a really ambitious goal. Like he would have a lot of ambition if you saw yourself to have ambition, if you saw yourself as somebody who was deserving of lots of ambition, are deserving of achieving really high goals, and no, it's just the amount of sacrifice. I don't know why I read that whole thing. It just seemed like it would start saying exactly what I said at some point, but it never did. It was just off enough. So whatever, like Siri thinks I was talking to it. Siri, that's what Siri thought. That's what Siri thought. But what's important about Sanctimony is that about a month ago, Elon Musk tweeted this tweet that I saw, and he was like, Silicon Valley is becoming sanctimonious valley. That's what's important about Sanctimony, is that, to me, is that Elon Musk is like, Silicon Valley is becoming sanctimonious valley. That's what he said. He said it's becoming sanctimonious valley, but he said that because he wants to, for public perception purposes, he wants to paint himself as different from Silicon Valley. Like Silicon Valley is competitors to Elon Musk, but it's a whole mentality, really. It's a whole mentality. It's like the Silicon Valley is more corporate and like tied in with government, and Elon Musk wants to kind of paint himself as being separate from governments and kind of just totally for the people and for the world. Like his brand is that he's for the world, and he's successful at painting himself that way because he is actually more for the world. But you would, I mean, I guess you'd wonder if it was just more a marketing ploy, but it's like, I would say that he's pretty genuine about what he's doing because he just does things more for fun, but just as a result of like, he's kind of more on board with you just creating things out of your imagination, or that things don't have to be all restricted, or that the restrictions that exist to inhibit us from doing things like aren't really necessary, that Elon Musk is just above restrictions put on to us by like large corporations or the corporation, like, and government, industrial complex, whatever. Like he's kind of above that, even though we would think that all of our ventures would be ultimately restricted by them. Elon Musk paints a picture for us that, well, you can be outside of it, you just got to do things or whatever, you just got to be an innovative genius or something. Like his brand is that he's just a genius, void of the influence of corporations and that kind of thing. So he's gonna naturally want to paint Silicon Valley as sanctimonious. Like, so that's something you would have to look at when you're seeing a tweet like that. But he's really good at Twitter for tweets like that. But because it's a good accusation like that, I'd say that term sticks pretty well, that Silicon Valley is sanctimonious, because it's true that they are. So you can tell that that's just something that Elon Musk wanted to say himself. Like that was something he wanted to say, was that Silicon Valley is sanctimonious. But they're sanctimonious because they are that. Like if you met somebody who worked at Google, they would be really sanctimonious about Google. But like Google and Facebook Google and Facebook and Twitter and YouTube are all virtue signaling or whatever. They're all virtuous. Like they all think that they have the moral superiority. Like sanctimonious is a word that people are starting to use a lot more just to describe somebody who's sanctimonious. I'd say it's kind of like it's interchangeable with somebody who thinks they have moral superiority or is self-righteous, but like it's a self-righteousness especially. It's self-righteousness, but self-righteousness is a term that never really sticks for some reason. Like maybe sanctimonious can stick better than self-righteousness. Because self-righteousness is a term that's been around for a while, it feels like to me. I don't know if it already had its peak, like it already had its rise and fall or something. Like it's not, but we don't ever call self-righteous behavior self-righteous. Like maybe people don't know how to apply the term, but like sanctimonious is kind of a new and improved self-righteous that people are starting to use for people who have moral superiority. So it's kind of like that it has an ammonious at the end of it, sanctimonious, I feel like speaks to that it's like a character trait of some kind. Like it's a trait or it's a personality trait that's inherent to a person or a corporation, but it's kind of hard to see. It'd be more difficult to comprehend a person that's sanctimonious if you're looking at sanctimony as a character trait, because it's hard to understand somebody that's naturally morally superior, that they're just like naturally like that. But there are people like that, like it's a trait. It's not just an evil, because it's people are definitely using it at this present moment to paint a negative light at the person or corporation that they're calling sanctimonious. People use it to negatively, but like you can see it as that it's just a trait that people have. Like some people just have that ability. They have a stronger, like you just have a stronger belief in yourself, or just like an inherent trust in yourself might lead to you being sanctimonious. But like it just means that you think that you're right, really. It means that you think that you're right, but automatically to the point that you're like, so it's like, what would give you that trait, like that you would have the ability to say that you're right? Like it speaks to virtuousness, that you think that the virtues and the morals that you see in life and that you take away from the stories that you live through are more actually virtuous, or are the right virtues to have. Like Elon Musk is calling Silicon Valley Sanctimonious Valley because they're so liberal, essentially, because they're very liberal and dictate a very liberal message and draw a hard line at a liberal religious viewpoint or a liberal morality. But like a liberal morality is inherently sanctimonious anyway. Like that you would have a liberal morality is like, you can't really escape from being sanctimonious, because it just has so much to do with authority, like that you have the moral high ground if you're taking the liberal side of things, and you get the moral high ground because it's like it's kind of understood that you're supposed to see morality through liberalism, at least in the past decade or so. Like you're supposed to believe in global warming. I mean, I'd say that that's kind of dissolving somewhat, to the point that like we kind of laugh at people who are really liberal at this point, and like memes do a lot in the way of tearing down liberalism, I would say, because most of the people on board with memes are actually conservatives, and liberals can get on board with memes is the thing too. Like it allows memes make it so that there's like memes will make it so that liberal people see the error in liberalism a lot more, but like it helps dissolve whatever power was in place for liberalism like 10 years ago, because liberalism was going really strong 10 years ago. Not that it's not going strong today, it's just that it was at its height in the Jon Stewart influenced Obama era. But like modern day liberalism is always trying to be like that, really. But that's 10 years ago. It's just like modern day liberalism doesn't have the means to, it doesn't have the resources to continue like that it had 10 years ago. It didn't have the full-fledged power of the media behind on its side. It didn't have the country believing that the media was one-sided against liberals, which is what people believed during the Jon Stewart era. They thought that if there was corrupt media, it was only on the right, but like that was just like that extended past liberalism to just be kind of a national mindset. It's like the Jon Stewarts and Stephen Colberts were successful at painting that picture for people, and so liberalism had a big stronghold in the country 10 years ago, and now things are different. But you're like, they're sanctimonious because they're liberal, because like you meet somebody who works at Google, you know that they're just going to be all about Google, but it's an echo chamber of liberalism, that everybody at Google is going to have to be liberal, and that's going to bite them in the ass at some point. And you see that it's starting to bite them in the ass, that we're able to attach a word like sanctimonious to them, which is largely viewed by the country as a negative thing to be, that we're able to attach sanctimonious successfully to Silicon Valley. I would say that we're able to attach it. It's not like everybody would believe that the label sticks. It's just that like labels will start to stick to you if you're that one-sided in one direction. We're able to define what your agendas and your motives are. The more that we're able to do that is the less relevancy that you're going to have as a corporation. So it's like the Googles and Twitters, Facebooks of the world, I think, should watch out for the left bias that they have, even though that's the problem, is like they're so blinded by it. They're so blinded by their moral superiority. They think that they're right so much that they're blind to how they could be wrong, is what makes them sanctimonious. Like they think that, like they already think that they're right. Like they don't have a way of going back to check on themselves. They don't check on themselves. Like they're not able to look at themselves because they think that it's only all the other people around them that aren't able to look at themselves, because that are doing things wrong. Like they think that everybody that would disagree with them is unable to look at themselves, and like, but Silicon Valley is so sanctimonious that they think they don't even have to look at themselves because they already understand themselves to be morally superior. Like they think they don't need self-awareness, or like they don't need to have self-awareness because everybody knows that. They think that everybody agrees alongside Google and Facebook and Twitter with like what those Google, Facebook, and Twitter's viewpoint on life is. They all think that everybody agrees with them, which is like a trap that the media falls into, and the media is paying the price for that. Is like especially you see during the course of the 2016 election, they all thought that Hillary was going to win because they thought that the message that they were putting out, that Trump was evil, was just agreed upon by everybody, and there's no way that, and like they were sanctimonious enough to believe that they had that level of influence, but like that everybody was on the same plane as them and seeing what was moral and what was not. Like they think that everybody agrees with them, is what the mainstream media did in 2016, and they lost. And like maybe at that point they had to check what they were doing. Like when YouTube does their YouTube rewind, not the one this past year, because I guess the one this past year was an improvement, but the one the year before that was the worst one that everybody lit up. The one that like Will Smith was in a hot air balloon, this YouTube rewind video. The YouTube rewind is when they recap what was significant on YouTube in the past year, and they have all the YouTube people that were stars and the most influential in the past year in the YouTube rewind. And in the YouTube rewind, YouTube got really sanctimonious with it and tried to prop up these people that weren't really stars, but really just that furthered a political agenda for them. And everybody on YouTube pointed that out, and it was like one of the most disliked videos of all time, because the YouTube creators have a lot of say, and that's a really important battle in the world. I would say it's one of the most important ones that doesn't get enough credit, is the battle between YouTube creators and YouTube, because YouTube creators have a lot of influence to lash out at political agendas that are being forced on them by a sanctimonious YouTube. They're able to lash out, and so like YouTube had to look at themselves and try to put forth a less political agenda, and because the backlash was so significant in their direction because it was communicated to them that what they were doing was not popular in any way. And like YouTube is in the business of sort of in the business of being popular, or at least they should be, seeing as that YouTube is inclusive of so many different opinions. I mean, that YouTube includes literally anything. YouTube is a popular entity. They should capitalize on popularity. They should aim to be popular. If they're making a YouTube rewind, if YouTube itself is making content to reflect its inner soul, if YouTube is making content, it should aim to be popular, like, because they're a popular organization. That's what they are. It should be central to their identity. And if they're not successful at being popular, then they have to change something, because that's what they already are. They can't go the way of being unpopular. YouTube is popular. There's just a lot of sanctimony involved. Like, the reason that you feel suffocated about, like, if you would feel suffocated about publicly sharing a lot of your opinions, if you did, like, it's not really so harsh in the world that you can't go out and like talk to people and just like say what's on your mind. It's not like people are really sanctimonious, regular people that you encounter. It's not like they're so much like that they're going to be really pissed off at opinions you have. But generally, based on the political climate and all these different groups that you got to watch out for that are all sanctimonious, you will feel suffocated out of being able to speak on your own opinions because of the sanctimony. You got to watch out for sanctimony from this group and sanctimony from this group, or at least sanctimony is what you can describe as what you got to watch out for, because like the moral superiority of like Silicon Valley is so great that they will attack you without thinking about you for something that you did that crossed them, but like the same way that a religious group would. It's like Elon Musk is making the point that they're becoming too religious, and that's going to come back to bite them, because religion isn't really marketable. Ultimately, like, the more religious you get is the more separate that you are. It's like, if you're really stringently for a religion, is the more like it's more separated and less marketable that you become. And so it's not like, so Elon Musk isn't trying to help them out by like pointing out that they're sanctimonious. He's just calling them out for being that. But they're not going to change if somebody calls them sanctimonious, because that's the problem of being that, is that you don't realize that you are, but you're just given over to sanctifying things. But like, it would be easy to just say that somebody who's sanctimonious is somebody who likes to sanctify things or uphold the sanctity of things. It's just that like that sanctity appears in a person, or that sanctity is a character trait, is kind of what it's saying, that you sanctify things. But like, you have to watch out for all these groups that sanctify themselves. Like, you can't, like, anybody is a group that sanctifies themselves, though, to some degree. Like, you have to sanctify yourself in order to protect yourself. Like, that you uphold, that you put yourself forth as something, as having an identity, or like that a culture puts itself forth as having a culture or civilization, that it's separate from other civilizations and has its own culture. It's like there's sanctity in that, because you're deeming yourself, like, you have to understand yourself to be sacred to some degree in order to do that. So there's kind of sanctimony just in you being yourself. Like, there's some sanctimony, I don't know, maybe there's some, it's just like not the negative light of the word, not the way that we would just typically use it currently. Is there sanctimony in anything? Like, you do have to, like, the Chicago Cubs have to uphold the sanctity of themselves and their team and their history, you know, and it kind of delves more into, sometimes it delves more into history. It's like, the more sanctimonious you would be, like, look, we have this long history. Like, math has to they have to be sanctimonious, but like they're naturally sanctimonious the way that Silicon Valley would be, because they have the moral high ground in the area of math. So like Silicon Valley is sanctimonious though because they go past what they are to try to dictate life to you. Like they're gonna take on a political message and just tell you through, even though they're corporations, like they're Google is a search engine, and Facebook is a search engine, sort of like a news aggregator, and but a social media site, and whatever, like they're social media sites, and they're adaptable, they do lots of things, but they go beyond what they are. They think they have so much power that they're gonna start telling you what you're supposed to do morally too. Like they think that they have that much power. Like they see themselves as greater than they are. They think that they have so much influence that they are also allowed to tell you what you're supposed to do morally, or that you're supposed to agree with them morally. They think that because you buy into the search engine so much, like that everybody has to use a search engine, they think that since we're so dependent on Google, Facebook, and Twitter as it stands now, that they also get the right to make you dependent on their morality, or like that they think that them as an individual, because that's just something like your view on morality just kind of comes from your imagination. It just speaks to what you think individually is moral and what you think isn't moral, because your view on morality comes from your stories in life, come from your stories in life, like that you gain a moral out of something. You look back on a story that you had and you kind of see what was consistent throughout, and you're like, oh, that was like a moral of something that happened in my life, and that you become more virtuous. Is the same thing, like that you gain a virtue. Like they think that they're virtuous. They think that they're virtuous, that they're like, that they have the virtues that you're supposed to have. But like a virtue is automatically assumed to be a good thing. I don't know what virtue is bad. Like you have a virtue, that is a good thing you have, whether or not regardless of which one it is. Like a virtue is just meant to be like a patience or a peace or a joy. I mean, according to the Bible, you have like the biblical view of what is a virtue, but you don't have to go by the biblical view. You can say anything is a virtue, but that you have a virtue is like, if you call yourself virtuous, that means that you're like, I already possess what is good about life and what is moral. Like being virtuous is like being sanctimonious. It's like saying that the attributes you have are positive and for other people's benefit, unquestionably. Like I'm virtuous, like I'm a good person. So like that they would paint themselves as that. But Google and Facebook and Twitter paint themselves as virtuous all the time, especially like you see through their advertising and that kind of thing. Like yeah, you can just tell through their advertising that they think that they're think that they're virtuous. Like if you look at Google's and Facebook's ads, it's like they are they think that they're doing all the right things, and that they like appeal to everybody with their ads. Like I mean, I know that everybody does. It's just that they're like, their ads are really positive, as if the message that they put out is positive. Like Facebook, Google, and Twitter act as if they're always doing right by everybody. You can see that in their ads, but you can just see that by their mentality and by what they force on people. They think that they're always doing right by everybody with what they do. They think that they always have everybody's best interest in mind with the things that they do, or the people that they prohibit from their platforms. They always act as if they are doing the right thing, but that's just because they see themselves as virtuous, paint themselves as virtuous. So they try to force on you that they're virtuous too. They try to make that their public perception is that they're like, that they're virtuous, that they have your best interest at heart. And like the fact that they're sanctimonious is what allows people to see through that, or like why a Google and Facebook's ads, like they're just too big. They're trying to please too many people with their ads to actually present through their advertising a scenario that's palatable to people, because an advertisement is just a scenario that you're putting forth. That's a corporation to paint your corporation at the center of the world, for people to see that, like, that your corporation adds the most benefit to the world, or like that it is only in the world to add benefit to your life. And like they have to please so many people, or whatever, like, because so many people use their thing already. Like, since so many people use their thing already, it's like when they put forth an ad, they think that they are, like, it's like they already get to say that they reflect the viewpoints of lots of people. So it's like there's some truth to them thinking that they have the moral high ground is the thing. There's some truth, like they do actually have the moral high ground, seeing as that so many people agree with the argument and the reality that they're putting forth in the world, that their corporations are the most influential, or the most sought after, or who you should look to for guidance in your life, because there are a lot of people that, technically speaking, look to them for guidance. So like it would make sense that they would think that they have the moral high ground. But like, so in that case, it's like you can see the sanctimony of it. Like the sanctimony of it would have developed over time the more popular that they got. It's kind of like Twitter, Google, and Facebook, their head got too big, and now they're like, they think they get to dictate morality. But like that's just so that's how you would see that sanctimony isn't just a character trait, but something that that gets built into those corporations through the experiences they've had of like realizing that people are looking to them and that they do have that much influence. Like that's just something that would naturally happen. But like, in order for them to continue to be relevant in the world, they would have to get rid of the sanctimony that would naturally attach itself to them, or like the ego that they would naturally get from having that much influence. But like that's how Fortune 500 companies rise and fall so quickly. That's how they die so quickly. It's just like they can't handle the popularity of something. But like you can't whatever, not that they're on their way to dying or anything like that. It's just that that's eventually going to come back to haunt you, I would say, is if you're not self-aware enough to see your own problems. But like that, you think that it doesn't matter what mistakes you make, because your mistakes don't mean anything. But like Google, Twitter, and Facebook are in a position to think that their mistakes don't mean anything, because the money is coming in no matter what at this point. That influence they have will be there no matter what. Like their mistakes mean nothing. And at that point, I guess, is when you become sanctimonious, is like when you think that your morality is correct no matter what, is the point at which it doesn't matter what you do, like good or bad. You lose sight of what you do that's even bad, because your mistakes are forgiven instantly, because they have so much power already. So like at the point that your mistakes are forgiven instantly is like at the point that you lose sight of what's morality. But like I'd say that that's something that they start to do just by thinking they have the power to totally dictate morality. But like it would be easy to say that if you're sanctimonious, you like to sanctify things. So like what it would have to do with you looking back at your history, like, because you would feel more sanctified the more illustrious history that you had. You would think that you are more sanctified, are more worthy of being preserved. Like sanctity speaks to preserving, but like Silicon Valley wants to preserve the sanctity of things. I mean, I should just get off of that Silicon Valley's relationship to sanctity so I can talk about something else about it. Like you're sanctimonious, let me look at the definition for it. I was thinking today, I was like, I don't know what the immonious suffix means. Like, I don't know what other words those are. And then I was like, I can just look that up while I'm recording the thing, rather than that I'd look it up beforehand, because that would make for better radio. And that's a thought that I had when I woke up this morning. So I'm going to look at the sanctimonious. That's what I thought. That's the thought that went through my head when I woke up this morning. That's a thought I had. Okay, so sanctimonious is an adjective, making a show of being morally superior to other people. So you make a show of it. So like Googling it, sort of make a show. They make a show of it. Sanctus, it comes from the word sanctus, meaning holy. Sanctimonia comes from the Latin sanctimonia, meaning sanctity. So it's like that your sanctity that your sanctity as an adjective. That's the whole thing. It's hard to describe a person as being sanctity. Like a person who is sanctity, it would be easy to just say that they're somebody who likes to sanctify things or uphold the sanctity of things. Like somebody who likes to preserve things, but like that wouldn't necessarily be the case with Silicon Valley, but like that you would try to paint Silicon Valley as sanctimonious on Twitter, just kind of as like an exaggeration that you would like to do to make it so that people see Silicon Valley intersects with that character trait, rather than that character trait fully embodies what they are. It's just you want to point out to people, you want to deconstruct Silicon Valley a little bit. You're going to point out what is true about them, like what character traits can be seen in them. So it's like it would be an exaggeration to say that Silicon Valley is entirely sanctimonious. But that somebody is sanctity-ish is like it's just somebody who thinks they're right, would be somebody who thinks that things should be sanctified rather than that they should be destroyed, right? Somebody who seeks to preserve what's already there. So it's kind of more somebody who lives in the past rather than somebody who's looking toward what is going to replace what's currently in existence now in the future. Like it's not somebody who's thinking about what's going to be destroyed into the future, like what authorities are going to fall. It's somebody who likes the upholding of authority, which is kind of more like a liberal viewpoint. Like it's somebody who is sanctity-ish is somebody who likes the upholding of authority, likes the preservation, the sanctity of the borders of things, like doesn't like to see things destroyed, likes the sentimentality of things, I would say, likes the sentimentality. But it's like Elon Musk calling Silicon Valley sanctimonious. That's a nice way of saying that they're ritualistic. He's saying that they're given over to, that they're slightly given over to rituals, but like that you're ritualistic is kind of a more sentimental spirit, is that you keep things around just for the sentimentality of them rather than that you are being more rational with your use of things, like that you keep things around. You want to preserve the moral of something. You want to preserve your own story. You want to preserve your own story and like things that appear in your story. Like if you get sentimental about antiques and stuff, it just speaks to that you want to preserve your own story and you like worried about its dissolving or its destruction. Like you want to preserve things about yourself, and you like the authority of what you already know. Like it has more to do with the past and the historicity of things and your history and what you think is good. Like that, like it's the same thing as people going back to the heroes that they had in their childhood or growing up or just during their era when they were youthful. Like a hero that you had, that you preserve the sanctity of what was meaningful to your life. You don't look to that whatever were your heroes are just that they don't matter, and that like you want to whatever. You uphold the sanctity of things in general, though, not just the things particular to you. So is what would make you sanctity-ish is just you're somebody more sentimental or more of the past. Because you would preserve not just things particular to you, you just like the preservation, the sanctification of things that already exist. That's just somebody who's not really for the creation of things, because things that are yet to be created are not sanctified in any way. They actually don't exist. They have no borders around them, and there's no sanctity that can be read into them. There's no sanctity that can be read into something that doesn't exist or is yet to be created. That's just an idea. Like if you're trying to create something, you're proposing an idea to other people to see if they accept it so that it can be sanctified. Like sanctity only comes after something exists for a while, after people realize that there is a reason to sanctify it, like either an idea or an invention or a religious movement or a political party or a political leader, just a person, like, or a celebrity like Michael Jackson. Like people want to sanctify Michael Jackson and maintain the sanctity of him, but he had to do things successfully that we would like enjoy the transcendence that he's putting out in the world to try to sanctify it. But like he would be more sanctified because people see him as more transcendent. But the more that you do, that you resonate with people, that people have a sentimentality towards you because of what you did, that people like you, it makes it so that you have something worth respecting about yourself, that like people would then want to continue to uphold the sanctity of you and fend off people who want to destroy the name and image of Michael Jackson. Like people are so enamored with the idea of Michael Jackson that they're going to fend off anybody who tries to destroy what we thought about him, even though it's like even though he's pretty much a pedophile. Like people don't really, he's the only person that the idea of him has survived pedophilia, because people are just like, oh, it doesn't matter. He was too much of a talent for us to try to destroy what he meant to us. People really try to sanctify him. But like somebody who is just sanctity-ish is just not in the business of creating things. And so if you are a Silicon Valley, a Google, a Twitter, or a Facebook, who's like, you are technically speaking supposed to be the leaders of us into the future. You're supposed to be innovating all the time. And if you get a label like sanctimonious, that is not a beneficial one to you. It would not be beneficial to Google to be sanctimonious, because they can't be of the past. They have to be of the future. They have to not care about the sanctity of things so much. They get into morality of things that's antithetical to what it should be, antithetical to their business model. And it would come up, it would be a flaw to them at some point. It already is a flaw. It's just that they have so much power that that flaw doesn't even matter. But so it remains to be seen if like a flaw could actually topple Google. It's hard for us to imagine that could happen, that we live in a world where or some technology could arise that's outside of a Google, Twitter, Facebook, social media technologies that replaces social media technologies, that some technology would arrive that's different from that. It seems like any technology that could arise would be under the jurisdiction of social media or Google, Twitter, and Facebook already, and Amazon really. So it'd be hard to think that that something would replace them. But like if something does arise, then the moral stances and the sanctimony that's prevalent throughout Twitter, Google, and Facebook would be their undoing at that point. Like that's a flaw that could undo them in some future. But so I'm going to look up, so that definition didn't really tell me a lot, but I guess I was able to say a few things about it. Sanctimonious, let me look up the etymology, or just the sanctimony etymology. But like I was saying mathematics is they're sanctimonious because they're going to try to sell you on they're like an elite that is trying to sell you on the authority of a language that they wrote, that like their elitism, mathematicians, like higher level mathematicians, their elitism depends on, it only lasts as long as you're not able to decipher the complicated language that they've conjured up in order to protect themselves, to remain as elite, in order to protect themselves enough for people to continue to see them, to have the authority of elitism. It's just, it only stands as long as you're as long as you read authority into the complicated language that they conjured up, and you read that authority as long as you're not able to disentangle the language. Like they made a they have a language that they made, but like I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if there's really something more to the mathematical languages of something like calculus, or if it's just kind of smoke and mirrors. That's something I'm in the process of figuring out. I wanted to do an episode just about calculus or one just about mathematics, but I have to actually research that. I have to actually do something educational and intelligent because I have to learn about all the functions a bit more before I do that. So the sanctimonious etymology: disparaging sense, making a show of sanctity, affecting an appearance of holiness. An appearance of holiness, like that you're holy, or that you want to sell to people that it's understood that you're holy, is what would make you sanctimonious. You want to it should be understood that you are holy, but like there's not really a compromise at holy. You're either holy or you aren't, seeing as that you're like either sacred or you aren't. Like people can't read into you that you're slightly holy, really. And so if you get to the point that you're sanctimonious or making a show of your holiness, you have to reach a level of self-righteousness where you just think that you're right. Like you have to reach a level where you can be sort of blind to your own problems, or not. You don't have to have so much self-awareness if you actually get to a point that you're saying you're holy or putting forth a show of holiness, that kind of speaks to a lack of self-recognition. Because if you say that you're holy, it would be somewhat false, because you have your own mistakes. Like people, you put forth that you're holy, it's kind of void of self-awareness to some degree, because a self-aware person isn't going around saying that they're holy or that they're right in every situation. In order to be self-aware, you have to understand that you're wrong as much as anybody is wrong. It's not really like it speaks to you feel like you're more of a god, or you're more holy, or you're more than a person if you are sanctimonious. But like a Google is going to end up that way, seeing as that they have the influence that they would think that there's some sort of god, so that's just going to naturally lead to them thinking that they're right all the time. So let me look up if monious has it sounds like the monious part of it is just an adjective that you describe as an adjective for the word sanctity, that you would try to say that a person is sanctity, is you have to put ammonious on the end of it. Monious, suffix meaning. Harmonious, alimonious, these are words with monious. Acrimonious, antimonious, ceremonious. Maybe I should look at what mony means. That's what I should look at. Mony. Okay, so the suffix mony is a suffix found on abstract nouns borrowed from Latin, usually denoting a status, role, or function, such as matrimony or testimony, or a personal quality or kind of behavior, acrimony or sanctimony. Okay, so it's like a word like sanctimony delves into the mony suffix being a kind of behavior as opposed to being a role or status. But sanctimony is a noun. It would be sanctimonious that you would describe as the trait. Like sanctimony is like the mony part of it. Sanctimony, that you would do something that's dripping with sanctimony or embroiled in sanctimony, that you would do something that's like really holier than thou, is like holier than thou is something that is dripping with sanctimony. Like holiness, it's kind of hard to describe. Like sanctimony is like holiness, but that you would have sanctimony would make you would make you holy, but like that we would see a person as trying to be holy is where the negative connotation of sanctimonious would come from. It's because people generally don't see other people to be holy and would be upset at people putting forth a holier than thou attitude. So it's like it runs into trouble. It gets a negative connotation because sanctimony shouldn't be applied to a person, or is like people don't like that attitude, sanctimonious one. But like there are things that should be sanctified, and so there are things that are up to the authority of sanctimony or sanctifiedness. It's like sanctifiedness is sort of like sanctimony. So that things are sanctified, like things should be sanctified, but you recognize the word sanctimony to capture just the idea of preservation of things, or the idea of that things are to be sanctified, I guess is the best I could do with that. The idea of that things are sanctified is like sanctimony. It's just kind of hard to explain people to be that way a little bit, or it's just more abstract. But yeah, thanks for listening. It was a pleasure. It was really a pleasure to be here. It was really just such a pleasure. But that's the episode, and it was really a pleasure, and I wish that you'd come and stroll back into this podcast again. That would really be a pleasure. It's just such a pleasure. The pleasure's all mine. Like I'm just so glad for that the pleasure was mine, that it could be and whatever way I want to end it. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for visiting me. Thanks for allowing me into your living rooms for the last 40 years. Talk to you later. Bye.